The day he threw out a billionaire and didn't know it until she became his boss. He stared at his wife clutching their newborn son, just 2 days old, and said the words that would destroy everything he thought he'd built. "Get out. We're done." He believed he was upgrading his life. He thought he was making a smart move, trading deadweight for ambition. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have imagined, was that the woman shivering on his doorstep had just inherited the entire building where he worked. Every floor, every contract, every paycheck, including his. In less than 24 hours, she wouldn't just be his ex-wife. She'd be the person who controlled his career, his reputation, and his future. This is the story of a man who gambled everything on cruelty and lost more than he ever knew he had. The rain didn't just fall that night in Seattle. It attacked. It pounded the roof of the cramped rental house on Elm Street like fists on a locked door, relentless and furious. Inside, the heater hummed quietly, but the warmth couldn't touch the ice forming in the air. Emily rocked the infant carrier gently, her arms trembling from exhaustion. She'd been released from the hospital only an hour before, her body still wrecked from the emergency C-section. Every step sent fire through her abdomen, sharp and unforgiving. But the physical agony was nothing compared to the suffocating dread wrapping around her chest. She'd called Matthew 3 times from the hospital lobby. No answer. She'd texted him that she and the baby were on their way home in an Uber. Nothing. Silence. "Matthew?" Emily's voice cracked as she nudged the door shut with her shoulder, water dripping from her coat onto the hardwood. "We're home. Baby slept the whole way." The living room looked wrong. Too clean. Too organized. The usual pile of junk mail was gone from the side table. The couch cushions were perfectly arranged. And then she saw them, 3 massive black suitcases lined up near the door like soldiers waiting for orders. Matthew sat in his leather recliner, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at the blank TV screen. He was dressed in his best suit, the expensive navy one he only wore for major presentations at Carter and Hale Logistics. "Matthew?" Emily whispered, her throat tightening. Are we going somewhere?" He finally turned to look at her. His face was blank, emotionless, terrifyingly calm. He stood slowly, took a sip of his drink, and set it down with deliberate precision. "No, Emily," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "We're not going anywhere. You are." Emily blinked, her brain refusing to process the words. She looked down at the sleeping baby in the carrier, little Samuel, barely 48 hours old, and then back at the man she'd married 3 years ago. I don't understand. This has to be a joke. Matthew, I just had surgery. I can barely stand." "It's not a joke," came a voice from the kitchen. Emily's blood turned to ice. The kitchen door swung open and a woman walked out. Blonde, young, confident. Emily recognized her immediately. Vanessa, the junior account manager from Matthew's office. She was 23, ambitious, and currently wearing Emily's favorite cashmere robe, the one Emily had gotten as a wedding gift from her late mother. Vanessa leaned casually against the door frame, arms crossed, looking at Emily like she was a stray animal that had wandered into the wrong house. "Matthew, what is she doing here?" Emily's voice cracked. "She lives here now," Matthew said flatly, moving to stand next to Vanessa. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. The message was clear. "I've been meaning to tell you, but there's never a good time for this kind of thing. I'm not happy, Emily. I haven't been for a long time." "You're leaving me?" Emily gasped, gripping the carrier so hard her knuckles went white. "Now? I just gave birth to your son." "That's exactly why," Matthew snapped, his calm mask slipping. "Look at yourself, Emily. You're a mess. No ambition, no vision. You're happy clipping coupons and living paycheck to paycheck. I'm moving up at Carter and Hale. I need someone who understands what it takes to be successful. Vanessa gets the corporate world. You? You just want to stay home and play mom. I supported you through your MBA, Emily screamed, tears streaming down her face. I worked double shifts at the diner so you could study, and now that you've got a little money, I'm not good enough? Matthew sighed and checked his watch. This isn't a debate. I paid rent on this place through the end of the month, but the landlord's transferring the lease to my name starting tomorrow. You need to leave, now. It's pouring rain, Emily sobbed. I have nowhere to go. My mom is dead. I have a newborn baby, Matthew. Your son. Matthew glanced at the carrier, his jaw tightening. I'll send child support checks once the lawyers draw up the papers. But right now, I can't have a screaming baby here. I have a meeting with the regional director in the morning. I need sleep. He grabbed the nearest suitcase, her suitcase, and dragged it to the front door, opening it to the storm outside. Rain and wind roared into the hallway. Matthew, please, Emily begged, dropping to her knees despite the searing pain in her abdomen. Just let me stay in the guest room for 1 week, just until I can find somewhere to go. Please don't do this to Samuel. Vanessa stepped forward, her heels clicking on the floor. She crouched down, not to help, but to look Emily directly in the eyes. Don't embarrass yourself, Emily, Vanessa said softly. Have some dignity. He doesn't want you. Matthew grabbed Emily's arm and hauled her to her feet. Get out, Emily, before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. He shoved the other 2 suitcases onto the wet porch. Emily stumbled backward, instinctively curling around the baby carrier to protect Samuel. She backed out onto the soaked concrete. Here, Matthew said, tossing a thick envelope onto the ground. That's $500. Should cover a motel for a few nights. Don't come back. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the rain. Emily stood there, alone in the dark, the rain soaking through her clothes in seconds. Inside the carrier, Samuel woke up and began to cry. Emily didn't remember walking to the bus stop. Everything blurred together, headlights, honking horns, the rhythmic wailing of her son. She collapsed onto the metal bench under the flimsy plastic shelter, shivering violently. Her suitcases were drenched. The envelope of cash was stuffed inside her bra, the only safe place she could think of. She checked her phone. 14% battery. She scrolled through her contacts. Who could she call? Her mother was gone. Her father had abandoned them when she was a baby. Some businessman who wanted nothing to do with a daughter. Her friends had slowly disappeared after she married Matthew, who'd convinced her they were low-value people. She dialed the local women's shelter. I'm sorry, honey, the tired voice on the other end said. We're at capacity tonight. Storm brought everyone in. Try the Salvation Army downtown, but they usually fill up by 6. It was 9:30. Emily hung up, choking back a scream. She opened her banking app. Balance, $42.50. Matthew had drained their joint savings account. He'd left her with nothing but the cash in the envelope. It's okay, Samuel, she whispered, rocking the carrier as tears mixed with rain on her face. Mommy's here. Mommy's going to figure this out. But she had no idea how. She was 26, unemployed, homeless, and recovering from major surgery. A car slowed in front of the bus stop. Emily tensed. It wasn't a bus. It was a sleek black Bentley with tinted windows, gleaming under the streetlights like something from another world. Emily pulled the carrier closer, her heart racing. Was this some predator looking for vulnerable women? The rear window rolled down with a soft hum. Mrs. Emily Morgan, a voice called out. Emily froze. She hadn't used her maiden name, Morgan, since marrying Matthew. Who's asking? She said, her voice shaking. The car door opened and a man stepped out. He was older, maybe 65, wearing an immaculate charcoal suit and holding a large black umbrella. He walked toward her with calm authority, unfazed by the rain. My name is Charles Whitmore, the man said, extending the umbrella to cover her and the baby. I'm the senior executor for the estate of Jonathan Ashford. Emily stared at him. Jonathan Ashford? The tech billionaire? I think you have the wrong person. I assure you, I do not, Charles said gently. He glanced at the suitcases, the crying baby, the devastation written across Emily's face. His professional demeanor softened into genuine sympathy. Jonathan Ashford passed away 3 days ago in Geneva. He was your father, Emily. Emily felt the world tilt. My father? No. My father was a deadbeat who left my mom before I was born. He wasn't a billionaire. He was a complicated man, Charles said quietly. He made many mistakes. Leaving your mother was the greatest one. But he kept track of you. He knew you married Matthew. He knew you were pregnant. Charles paused, glancing toward the house she'd just been thrown out of. He also knew your husband was unworthy. Emily let out a bitter, hysterical laugh. Unworthy. That's one word for it. Mrs. Morgan, Charles said, pulling out a handkerchief and offering it to her. Under the terms of Mr. Ashford's last will and testament, specific conditions were attached to your inheritance. He wanted to ensure you were free of certain entanglements before he intervened. However, given your current situation, I believe I have the discretion to accelerate the process. Inheritance, Emily whispered, wiping her face. I don't want his money. Where was he when my mom died? He paid for her hospital bills anonymously, Charles revealed quietly. And he paid for your college tuition through a scholarship fund. He watched from a distance. He was a coward in matters of the heart, Emily. But he was a genius in matters of business. And he has left you everything. Emily stared at him. Everything? The Ashford Group, Charles listed. The real estate portfolio. The tech patents. The controlling shares in multiple global logistics firms, including the parent company of Carter and Hale Logistics. Emily's breath caught. Carter and Hale, where Matthew works. The very same, Charles said, a glint of steel in his eyes. You now own 51% of the holding company that owns his employer, but we can discuss the portfolio later. Right now, you and young Samuel need warmth and rest. Charles gestured to the open Bentley door. The interior looked like a dream. Soft leather, warm amber lighting. Where are you taking me? Emily asked hesitantly. To the Peninsula Hotel for tonight, Charles said, and tomorrow to the Ashford estate on the cliffs. It's your home now. Emily looked back at the dark street leading to the house where her husband was drinking scotch with his mistress. She looked at the luxury car. She looked at her son. Charles, she asked, does Matthew know? Charles smiled, a thin, sharp expression. No one knows. The will is sealed until you formally accept it. As far as the world knows, the empire is in transition. As far as your husband knows, you're homeless. Emily stood up. The pain in her side flared, but she ignored it. She lifted the carrier and walked toward the Bentley. Let's keep it that way, she said, for now. The presidential suite at the Peninsula Hotel was bigger than the entire house Emily had shared with Matthew. Charles had arranged for a private doctor to examine her stitches and check on Samuel. Everything was handled. For the first time in days, Emily slept. She woke the next morning to the smell of fresh coffee and the sight of Seattle's skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. But it wasn't just a new day. It was a new life. Charles was waiting in the sitting area, a tablet and stack of documents on the table. Good morning, Miss Morgan, Charles said, reverting to her maiden name. I trust you slept well? I did, Emily said, wrapping herself in a plush robe. She felt different. The fear from the night before had hardened into something cold and sharp. What happens now? Now, Charles said, tapping the stack of papers. We execute the transition. You've inherited assets totaling approximately $1.4 billion. Emily stared at the black screen. Destroy him, she whispered. We have a developing situation, Charles said, checking his phone. This morning, Matthew filed for divorce electronically. He's citing irreconcilable differences and petitioning for full custody of the child, claiming you're unstable and homeless. He's attempting to avoid paying child support. Emily's hands clenched into fists. He threw me out. How can he claim I'm unstable for being homeless when he made me homeless? The law is a game of narratives, Charles said calmly. He has a job, a home, and a lawyer. As of yesterday, you had nothing. But the narrative changes today. I want him to pay, Emily said quietly. Not money. I want him to feel what I felt. I want him to understand what he threw away. Charles smiled. Then let's begin.